Hi, welcome or welcome back to my channel and happy end of semester. I hope you all fulfilled your Orilium goals. If you don't know what Orilium is, it is hosted every April and August by G over at Book Roast, and it's so much fun. You can join it anytime and pick up a calling or major of your choice, and you get to create a little character, and you just get to basically read a bunch of books that you might not have or might be on your backlist because you are forced to, based on prompts. It works great for people like me who have lots of books that need reading. I am about to talk about mine, and yes, spoiler, I did finish all of my courses, but I did not fulfill the lore challenge. Admittedly, I started the readathon like a week and a half into it, so 17 books in 2.5 weeks. I did pretty good, actually. I already posted one video talking about my Beast Master experience, but I'll just chat about what that looked like quickly in case you missed that one. For that, I had to do animal studies first. This is my official Orilium notebook, by the way, and has always been. And for that, I had to do Call Lightning. I needed a source of light on the cover. And for that, I chose a book called First Light Winds. I enjoyed it. The next one for this one was Animal Studies. I had to learn about pebble ducks, so I needed the yellow title. This was Just Another Missing Person. I enjoyed this one too. After that, I did Alchemy, and I needed a transmutation circle spell thing. So I needed a circle on the cover. Iron Flame. We had some issues with Iron Flame. Then I needed a book for restoration, which was Regaining Consciousness, a book that I thought could cure a reading slump, and that was House of Flame and Shadow. There were tears, there was yelling. Did it cure reading slump? I don't know. I had to read something afterwards to get it out of my head, so you tell me if that counts. And after that, I just had to reread The Legend of Dia, which was lore, and I guess I'll be doing a whole challenge for that after this. So fun times. Next up, I get to go be a wild form druid, and for wild form druid, you basically get to like learn to not just have an animal familiar, but kind of turn it into an animal, which is so neat. Who doesn't want to learn to do that? Like, come on, what would I probably end up being? A deer. They're cute and kind of skittish, which makes sense because I feed wild ones in my yard. Always an affinity for deer. So for this, I had to read Art of Illusion. We were learning shadow play. It's not as fun as it sounded when I think of shadow play. I'm thinking shadow daddies. This was not shadow daddies. You had to read a book with the word game or play in the title, and I had a really hard time coming up with this. I was looking at like Playboy books and like Kindle Unlimited. I was saved when I found a book by Ruth Ware, whom I adore, The Lying Game, because I've read like the Inheritance games and a lot of books on my shelves that had the word game in it. They were read. But look how cute this is. I almost dressed to match this. This is one of her older ones. I think this is her third book. Before this, she'd only come out with In a Dark, Dark Wood and The Woman in Cabin 10, which I totally forgot was even by her. Whoops. So this is about a bunch of friends who'd gone to school at this like kind of like second-rate boarding school in this little tiny coastal town in miles outside of London, and there were 4 of them. They were besties and they played the lying game, and basically the thing was you had to make up lies and try and fool people with them. The bigger the lie and like the higher up the person and the more like invested in the lie they became, the more points you got. It was kind of a sick game. Okay, but would a teenager play it? Yes, I buy it. Anyway, one day, brand new mommy gets a phone call from her bestie and is like, hey, you need to come down to my cottage. They found a bone. While these friends really didn't want to get their lies discovered, they really wanted to keep their skeletons in the closet from the time they were in school. One skeleton in particular. So this friend goes and meets up with all of their former friends to assist friend number 1 with the discovery of this bone, which I'm sure you're guessing at this point was related to their former game at their school called Salton. My review. You can tell this is an earlier Ruth Ware book, but if you have read her 2 previous books, this diverged a little bit. This did a really good job, not necessarily doing dual timelines, but bringing the past into the present and showing us memories really effectively at really effective times. I will say, fair warning, there is a mangled sheep that shows up quite early on. If you have an issue with injured livestock, the description is there and it gets brought up multiple times. I know it was meant to bring on a sense of menace. For me, being who I am and where I have grown up and lived most of my life, I was just ready to call my neighbors about the coyotes being back. Don't pet those. They're not husky mixes. Anyway, the characters themselves I thought were good. I think this is the first time where we start to see characters become more like caricatures and start really having a little more depth, having a little more growth. We see them from the time that they are children through the time that they are adults. And this is the first time that we have seen characters have a chance to grow this much. In A Dark, Dark Wood, we only saw characters for maybe 4 or 5 years. And The Woman in Cabin 10, we really didn't have a chance to see that much growth from what I remember. So that was really nice. And we really did see them diverge on their paths. And we also saw some great Muslim representation. There was a girl who initially in the story as a child didn't really take that on. And she made it very, very clear that it was her choice as she got older to decide wearing headwear and to take up praying multiple times a day, and it was very much her decision, not her husband's. It was important to her, and I loved seeing that representation. I was really surprised to see that in Ruth Ware because I don't really recall her doing that with other characters, again, in other books that I've read from her. The story itself, you kind of know where it's going. It's not totally a surprise. It is a little bit predictable. I felt like this was very much an experimentation for her. This was an experiment in learning how to develop characters. This was an experiment in learning to play with twists. I felt like she wasn't entirely sure which character she was going to have the whodunit be. She was going back and forth herself for a lot of the book, which was interesting, or at least that's how I felt. We all saw the ending coming. We all kind of knew how it was going to end. But that didn't take away from my enjoyment of the story. You could tell it was old Ruth Ware, but in a nostalgic, fun way. If you're a fan of Ruth Ware, don't miss out on this one. I really enjoyed it. It had great beachy atmosphere and the claustrophobic sense of returning to an old hometown where everyone knows everything and everyone is just ready to jump on you after you were part of something scandalous, and the sense of the tide coming in on you and you being trapped with all these inlets and trapped in this house that is slowly crumbling into this sea and is going to fade away, and are you going to crumble with it? It very much had this great atmospheric build that I appreciated so much, and the house, of course, being representative of the girls' relationships, it was great. It respected all of the characters in a way that I definitely appreciated. So I thought this was a very good book. This came out in 2017, so this is definitely after Pretty Little Liars, and I was afraid we were going to see things that maybe pulled from that show or maybe borrowed from that show too much. This was something completely different. This was where the girls were in control of the lies and the lies got away from them. There was a tiny hint of like blackmail at some point, but it was nothing that I felt was referential. So if you enjoy Ruth Ware, I think this is a good one. Is it her strongest book? No, absolutely not. But was it fun to read? Definitely yes, though. Solid choice. Glad I picked this one. Next up for my astronomy class, I had to pick a zodiac recommendation. So I ended up choosing for this one, The Downstairs Girl by Stacey Lee. I found this one from actually a library site. The staff recommended this for a Virgo because people born under this sign are known for always being busy, striving for perfection, having a strong desire to help others, and not being afraid to voice their opinions or speak up for what is right. And you know what? I guess actually for once that's not a terrible description of me. Usually they're describing people who are like super organized and like type A, and you should see my house. The Downstairs Girl is about Jo, who I do think is very much inspired by Jo from Little Women. Let me just put that right out there immediately and you'll see why I'm saying that now. And she lives in this dark, dank, creepy basement with this old elderly gentleman who's like a grandfatherly type and has kind of taken her on basically as a grandfather, and they live down there and they're working together in what is basically like the Gilded Age, and she is working in a hat shop, but she's very interested in writing and learning language, and so she takes on a job writing this newspaper column as Miss Sweetie, and it's sort of like an advice column, but she also writes these articles that are very like controversial, like should a lady wait to get married or not marry at all, and should a lady ask a man out to a dance instead of waiting for a man, things like that, you know, shocking for the time period. Because of the things she's writing, you know, people want to find out who she is, so there's a lot of backlash. Talks a lot about like race because obviously she is of Asian descent. There's a lot of stuff about gender in there, and then she also finds this mysterious letter that is talking about her own heritage because she really doesn't know who her parents are or who her family is, so that's the part of it as well. And of course there is one of the gentlemen running the newspaper who is quite attractive and who is somewhat enamored with this scandalous, brash woman who's writing these letters, Miss Sweetie. So I loved this. There's this whole underlying plot about this horse race down there. My neighbor has horses. I grew up with neighbors who have horses. I rode horses right now. So I enjoyed all of that, of course. But what I enjoyed absolutely the most was Jo and the language of this book. This is one of those books, it's not multi-point of view, which normally is my favorite, and it's also first person, which is not normally my favorite. But in this case, the voice jumps off the page, especially in the letters, and especially when Jo herself is like really pulling in and giving those asides. Oh my goodness, she is sarcastic, she is funny, she is witty, she is so sharp and vibrant, and the puns, this is so punny. That is the word I have to use. The plays on words continue along with other characters so that the banter, particularly back and forth with her romantic interest, is incredible, and it makes perfect sense because they're both obsessed with words, they both work at a newspaper, they are both going back and forth literally doing plays on words with words about language, and if you love reading, if you love words, you're going to love this too. I was literally laughing out loud at some of the ridiculous things that they were saying. I could not stop cracking up. And her newspaper articles are also filled with plays on words as well. They're so funny. There were also nuggets of wisdom that I think were based on like Chinese proverbs throughout, which were terrific as well, which she included in her articles, but with a little twist of her own, which I adored. Jo was just the absolute shining star of this, and her grandfather was wonderful too. He was just one of those figures who steals the show in his scenes and steps forward and hugs you when he comes onto the page. At times in the beginning, I was wishing it wasn't YA so it would dig more into the social issues that it was absolutely bringing up. Seeing women's suffrage, seeing the beginning of the Jim Crow era, putting that all together so we could see the disparities in a single book. It was just very jarring, but it was also done in a way that was really accessible for YA readers, and bringing it all together around this one horse race was done so cleverly and carefully, and the mystery of her parents was even fun. This was just a great book. I see why Stephanie Garber blurbed it, and I'm pretty sure this is a Goodreads Choice Awards winner at one point. So if you enjoy historical fiction, but feel like you get bogged down in it sometimes, like I feel like some authors, it's too far, it's too much. I am just drowning in misery at times because history, let's face it, oh my God, the human race is terrible. This is one where you're going to learn some things and you're going to feel some things, but you're also going to be laughing and smiling, and you're going to see history, and it's not going to gloss over anything, but it's going to stay light and fresh and witty at the same time. A+ on this one. I loved it. I also had to read another elemental studies book for this one, and there's a funny story that goes with this book. So I chose The Vixen's Lead by Tate James. This is the first in the Kit Davenport series. This is a Why Choose Romance series, and when I described it initially, I lied to all of you because, well, it is true that she is a thief who is cunning and delightful and a sexy redhead who is going to be in a Why Choose Romance. She doesn't actually turn into a fox. The book I was thinking of is called The Nine, and it was never finished. That was the one I wanted to reread and finish the series of. I can't. It was never done, and it was written by Tate James, but it was also written by C.M. Stunick, or Stunich, and the two of them often write together, and when they get together, the books are wild, okay? They are, like, rampantly, almost offensively hilarious and over the top and sweary and sexy, and just be by your bedside table. This one is a little more slow burn, thank God, because she is apparently in high school, and at first I was like, oh no. Also, how is she, like, this amazing super thief who leaves little miniature foxes at all the places she steals from, which love. And her bestie is also at this boarding school. They come from like a really abusive, horrendous foster situation, and then they were adopted out of it, and now they are at this boarding school that is paid for by Kit's now rich daddy Warbucks, who adopted her. But he realized he's a terrible dad and finds it awkward, so he's like, don't call me dad and I'm going to send you to school. The whole thing. I can't. Her bestie is this like super technology person, and she like helps Kit rob these people, and she's probably been doing this since she was like 14, 15. It opens with her like climbing around lasers and diving out windows and stealing like $1 million paintings, and I just, girl, you're in high school. No, you are not. Go do your homework. The book later makes it very clear that she is a year ahead of everyone else, so she's like 19, and that's supposed to make me feel better as we slowly meet her love interests, who are all in their like 20s. The oldest is 25. I still am having problems with it. Eventually, these two twins show up to her school one day, and she's already looking at them kind of sus, and one is a total, like, absolute jerk to her, of course, and the other one is, like, super sweet and trying to, like, get in her pants immediately, and, like, should she be more suspicious? Yes. Is she? No. They're hot. They have six-pack abs. She is too busy hating on the one and, like, dying over the other to really, really be concerned. So that is where this book begins, and eventually it's going to be her and 5 guys solving this huge mystery of, like, her childhood and why she has these certain abilities that we see pretty much immediately. She can kind of, like, heal really quickly, and she's faster and stronger than she should be, and fox-like, if you will. So that is this series. What did I think of it? Look, if you can get around the fact that she's the age she is, and she's gonna be enjoying men who are older than she is, and she has these mysterious powers, and it's very 2017 Why Choose. Like, it was a nostalgic read. I had so much fun reading it. I enjoyed it. Once I got over the fact that this A, wasn't the book that I thought it was, and B, she was, like, technically still in high school, like, why? Why? Here's my quandary. Do you see what I mean? The writing's fine, like, it's fun. Are the steamy scenes fun? Yes. Is the build fun? Yes. Am I going to continue on with the series? I thought it was 4 books, and I ordered the next 3, and it turns out there's 6. I'll probably read them. They're such fast reads, and it is so luxurious to be buying these indie Why Choose books in paperback. Are they annoyingly expensive sometimes? Yes. Is it just so fun to feel like I've gone back in time 5, 7, however many years, and I'm reading these books again, and I'm, like, younger, and everything's, like, new and exciting and fresh in this world, and I'm just discovering Kindle Unlimited and Why Choose and all this stuff. Yeah, no, it's nostalgic, it's fun, and you can polish one of these off in, like, 2 hours, honestly. So if you like Why Choose, if you hadn't read this, I know this is a really famous one. I feel like I need to read the series because everyone's read the series who reads Why Choose. So it's time for me and Kit Davenport to get to know one another very intimately, and we're gonna have fun doing it. After this, I had to study Conjuration, which we were studying the Blinding Prism spell, and I had to do a color wheel, which I did live, and I got pink, which is great. I love the color pink. I read Peril in Pink because it was, like, the pinkest book I could find, the pinkest cover. It had the word pink in the title. I was like, yes, Peril in Pink. And this is by Sydney Lee. So this is about a girl who is opening an inn with her best friend. They're super excited to do it. It's their opening night. It's called The Pearl. It's down in Florida. It is super Insta-worthy, Insta-ready. Everything is, like, shiny and glamorous and ready for you to, like, take your picture everywhere. And the whole point of it is literally to go on, like, a girls' weekend and, like, take photos everywhere. Like, they've got the bikes, they've got the picnic baskets, they've got the perfect pool, the perfect bar, the perfect rooms. Everything is just picture perfect. And to set off their weekend, she has invited her ex, who is named, what is it, Lars? Oh, it's a terrible name, who had competed on this, like, American Idol-esque but country show, and he had won, so he's sort of famous now, and he's gonna help with the opening and sing there, and everyone's really excited. They're totally booked. The mimosas are being poured, people are checking in, and now they're waiting for Lars, and Lars is not showing up on the stage, and for some reason, the guy he, like, competed against and got second place is there, and he's like, oh, I'll get on stage. I mean, that's not sus at all. He gets on stage, and he performs and he saves the day, and then they find Lars and they're like, yo, where were you? He was like, well, I was fighting with my dad, and then they find the dad, and the dad is now a dead body. And that's how the book starts off. So what got me was that this is described not just as a cozy mystery, but as, like, kind of Schitt's Creek meets Only Murders in the Building, and I was like, oh my god, I love both those shows so much, and, like, it disappointed. I'm so sorry to say, totally disappointed. I don't know if it's because I listened to it on audio and the audiobook narrator did not narrate how I wanted her to. Like, I wanted my narration, okay? She, like, missed the puns and, like, was not giving the right emphasis, and, like, there was no joy in her delivery. She did all the side characters great, but the main character was just so flat. Like, no. Also, if you have ever listened to crime podcasts, you're either going to listen to My Favorite Murder or you're going to listen to Crime Junkies, and I listened to Crime Junkies. In this book, they are obsessed with only murders in the building, and I've never heard that podcast, so I missed out on like the references, the inside jokes, and like every chapter at some point they're talking about how they're murderinos and learn this or learn that, and there's something in there, and it just got kind of annoying. Would I have had fun, like, if I was a fan, or if it was a crime junkie thing? I honestly don't know. Like, I just feel like they were relying on it so much. Just say you're a fan of true crime, or an amateur detective, or something. Like, stop relying on that all the time throughout the book. It just got repetitive, I guess. And I think what killed it for me truly is that when I sit down to read a cozy mystery, I want to feel cozy. Like, I want it to be about like a little bookshop or a little cafe or a cute little town, or like set in the Scottish Highlands, like something that's just gonna make me feel like, oh, like it's fall, basically. And instead I got like Florida and glam and like Hollywood-esque problems, and none of that read cozy mystery to me. It didn't work for me. It did not work for me at all. The other problem was that like throughout the whole thing, like you couldn't really solve it too well, and maybe I wasn't paying enough attention. You're following the clues and like trying to solve it, and like normally in cozy mysteries. But they did not give you the final clue until the very end, and then you solve it immediately along like with the final character. Like, it was one of those. It didn't even make sense. It was a random happenstance by chance kind of thing, and like that's not my favorite kind of mystery either. Like, I want actual meaning and purpose, and like, oh, this happened for a reason. It wasn't great. So Peril in Pink, I'm sorry to say, I love an alliteration, but that could not save this book. So for spells and incantations, I had to do a quick count spell, which, God, that would be great, because you know who can't do math? Anyway, you do a random number generator to find the number of letters in your title length, and G said do between 5 and 30 letters, and I got 8, which sucked. So the book I read for this one was Red Queen. Red Queen by Victoria Aveyard was a DNF from a long time ago, and I was really, really nervous, but I own this entire series, and I feel like it's a required read. And since I've never read any other dystopian book, that's right, never, not Divergent, not The Hunger Games, didn't see the films, nothing. I felt like this was a good choice. This is about Mare, who lives in a world where people are divided by their blood. If you're a red blood, sorry, you're out of luck. You're like poor and boring and awful. If you're a silver blood, not only are you like elite and powerful and you have lots of money, you've got magical powers. Yeah, that's right. If you have silver blood, you have some sort of magic literally running through your veins. Congratulations! Mare is kind of like trying to get through life. If you don't have a job or aren't apprenticed by the time you turn 18, you are sent off to a war where you're most likely going to come back really battered or in a box. She's not apprenticed, so that's really unfortunate for Mare. 3 of her brothers are currently at war, also unfortunate. Her one sister is doing well and is really great at embroidery, but Mare is basically helping her family get by being a thief, which is a terrible plan because they're gonna break her hand if they find that out, but you know, go Mare. Anyway, one day she is at the palace trying to find a way to get enough money to like escape their terrible town, because she knows her friend is about to be sent to war and she knows he's not going to do well at war. And she accidentally reveals that she has magical powers, but she also has red blood, which is impossible. So they're like, oh my God, we're gonna make you the long lost princess of something royal. You were just magically discovered. You thought you were red blood this whole time. That's what we're gonna tell everyone, and you're gonna stick to the plan. And by the way, we're gonna marry you off to our second son. Okay, you got it, good. You tell anyone anything else, then dead. Oh, and bring it to your family too. And Mare's like, okay then. So she's at the palace. She's learning to be royal. She is making sure she doesn't bleed ever at all on anything. Oh God, I wonder how this works around that time of the month. No one addressed that. Boy, they should have. That would have been interesting. Basically, it's like we've got the 2 princes, the one she's engaged to, and then the one who's set to inherit the throne, and like, which is the good one, which is the bad one. There is, of course, this whole rebellion undercurrent, and it's totally interesting. And I thought I knew exactly how this was going to go, and that's why I'm describing it to you, because you think you totally know how it's going to go if you haven't read it, and you don't. I didn't. I thought I did. I made so many assumptions, it's not even funny, and by the end of the book, I was just like, I'm sorry, what? First of all, I would like to say that Rebecca Yarros has 1000% read this book, okay? Like 1,000,000%. has read this book. So I definitely saw some places where things were borrowed for Fourth Wing, which was absolutely hilarious. And I was like, oh my God, like the influences for this book on Fourth Wing are wild. So if you enjoyed Fourth Wing, yes. If you like dystopian books, but we're like, oh, you know what? I wish instead it was like princesses and stuff. Go for this book. If you read the one where it's basically The Bachelor with America's Singer, which was terrible and I could not finish to save my life. If you liked those vibes, but wished it wasn't bad, try this book. I was really pleasantly surprised and I really thought it was going to be too YA for me at first. But there's like political stuff going on. There's interesting magical powers going on. There is all kinds of stuff going on in this world, and I really did not know what was going to happen at the end. I was so wrong. And you know what? For a YA book, the characters were so much more vicious and cutthroat than I thought they were going to be. And the political stuff that was going on was so much better than I thought it was going to be. Yeah, no, I'm going to be continuing on with the series. If you've read this book and are laughing at me so hard right now because I was like, yeah, I guess I'll read it. I think it's going to be like boring and I already know what's going to happen. What I've learned from this one is that if you are going to give me a girl and you're going to pit a light and a dark prince against her, I'm going to eat it up with a spoon and I'm going to love it and I'm going to be like, I love this prince. No, I love this prince. No, I think he's the good one. No, I think he's the bad one. Is he going to betray her? Is this the side I should be on? I don't know who has better chemistry. I can't trust anything anymore after this semester at Orilium. I am shooketh. I really had a good time with this. I was pleasantly surprised. The women were on equal footing with the men, if not above the men. They were smarter, cleverer, and it was the men who were the ones who were doing like the sneaking around, if anything, and who needed to find their footing at times. And in the end of this book, all I can say is, you can't trust anyone. I feel betrayed. But man, it was a good time. After this, for restoration, I read Bloodmarked by Tracy Deonn. This was fantastic. You can hear all about it in my first Orilium video. And finally, I had to read something for shapeshifting. We were learning about mimics, which are apparently a lot scarier than I thought they were. Not like funny and cute, according to my husband, so okay. For this, I had to read from an author who blurbed my last 5-star read was The Love Songs of W.E.B. Du Bois. I was slightly terrified, but I had recently picked up Take My Hand from Book of Month by Dolan Perkins Vows, and I was like, well, at least it's short. This is about a nurse in the early 1970s in Alabama whose job it is to help the government deal with different families. And in this particular case, she is working at the Montgomery Family Planning Clinic, and she is in particular this book is focusing on one family in which she is expected to give these girls who are 11 and 13, who have never even kissed a boy, birth control, just to make sure that they are not, going to get pregnant since they are, under state care, basically, which is horrifying in and of itself. But they're on welfare benefits, so they don't really get a choice in the matter. Erica and India, that's their names, they're living in these really rough conditions, and they're living with just their father, and Sybil Townsend is the nurse's name, and she tries her best to get to know this family, to help them, to do everything she can to improve their living situation, and, take care of these girls. And she's kind of grappling with this situation. Like, these girls have never even kissed a boy. Like, should I be giving them this birth control? Is this even healthy for them and their bodies? And as she's dealing with all of this, the description says the unthinkable happens one day when she heads out to see the family. And I thought I knew for sure what the book was setting up to happen, and it was so much worse than what I thought it was going to be. I was so unprepared, and that's when the book took off. That's when I saw all these things come together from history that I had learned about, not in school, not in college, just from starting to try and educate myself about what really happened in American history, especially with Black history, with BIPOC history, any of the history that was completely ignored in all of my schooling. And I have a freaking master's degree. Like, I should know something, but I didn't until I very recently started reading about it. And these are major events in American history that slowly get pulled into the book and talked about as a result of what happened. And Sybil starts uncovering things and learning more and realizing what a widespread issue the girls' experience is a part of. This was handled beautifully. It was handled well. What was so wild to me was how gentle the language was, how conversational the language was, how easy of a read it was in terms of language and how it pulled you in and how it felt so natural to just keep reading and reading and reading while these horrible things were happening to these characters and around them, and these continual discoveries were occurring, and these serious topics were just unbelievable, and yet they were handled, yes, respectfully, but also the way it was treated was just so much more effective in the sense that, like, Sybil wasn't totally shocked. Our shock felt that much more, oh my god, we shouldn't have been that shocked. Like, look at the world. Have you forgotten that their story is a part of something so much bigger? You know, we were looking at it on this myopic personal scale, and all of a sudden the scale zoomed out and became American history itself, and it was just, oh, I was so in awe when it was done. I didn't see it coming, and the story begins with Sybil Townsend, you know, being much, much older, and it ends with her being much, much older as a doctor and going to see these girls, like, essentially for one last time and seeing how they're doing after this irreparable damage. And to see it bookended in that way, the book would not have been the same without that. I think it was the perfect bittersweet ending to see how people go on and live their lives. Oh my god, it was unbelievably heartbreaking, and yet people can be so resilient, loving and appreciative regardless of what happens in their lives. If you do read this, be aware that a lot of things about reproductive health are in there, and if that is something that you are particularly sensitive to right now, this may not be the right choice for you. But on the other hand, I think that this is so important, and it covers things that are still being done today and are an issue today, which just blows my mind. That changed from myopic to a bigger worldview was very important for this book, and I think that's what made it so much worse, but also so much better as being a reader and emotionally. I don't know how else to describe this book, but it is so worth the read. After this, I got to go on to my brand new major, which is Thread Mage. I get to do thread magic, which basically means when I use thread, it's kind of like putting magic into the things that I would be making. It's the only thing that has to do with fashion at all in this world. So, you know what? I was like, yes, let's add another major calling, whatever you want to call it, because why not? So first I had to do one more alchemy book, and this was Transmutation Circles again. This is another circle on the cover, and for this I chose A Fate Inked in Blood by Danielle L. Jensen, and this also happened to be my house. I'm in like House of the Crescent. This was our like joint book that we could read if we wanted to be in the book club, and it ended up being my last book. I was saving it for last, and it's also the book I'm kind of like channeling today. I even added some braids in here for like the Viking feel. I don't know. It didn't really work out, but whatever. But this was one that I think that so many of my subscribers told me I was going to love. In particular, Bree is Gone, who has been chatting to me so much, and I hope you're feeling all the way better by now, by the way, told me that this was fantastic and she thought I was going to love it, and she usually gets my taste like pretty much exactly right on. So I was so excited to read this, and oh my god, I loved it so much. She was so right. The chemistry between these two, worth the wait to the end of the book. I'm just gonna tell you that right now. Here's your little like sound clip for the video. Vikings are hot, y'all. Oh, okay, I'm done. I'm not done. So this is about Freya, who is married to like the grossest guy ever, but he like can get all the fish he wants out of water, so I guess he gets whatever he wants. And apparently what he wants is not Freya anymore, because he talks to like their jarl, who is like the guy in charge of their like clan or whatever, and he's like, have her fight your son, I'm kind of over her, make it a fight to the death, I kind of want a new wife. And the guy's like, yeah, okay, sure, Bjorn, son of mine, go fight Freya. And when she does, she reveals that she has these powers of the shield maiden. Basically, she can call on a goddess, and it protects her from being injured in any battle. This sounds super cool and all. The problem with this is that there's this prophecy about her that says whoever is like linked with her, basically they take to mean married to her, is going to unite all of their kingdoms. And so, of course, this Jarl, Snorri, is like, okay, I'm going to marry you, and I'm going to have my son Bjorn, like, be your protector. And of course, Snorri is, first of all, old. Second of all, already has a wife. And third of all, she's not attracted to him, but do you know who she is attracted to? That's right, Bjorn, who has like a magic fiery axe because he also has a drop of God's blood in his blood. So ultimately, she enters into this blood oath with Snorri. She's kind of stuck with him. All the while, she's trying to resist Bjorn because, like, technically, he's sort of kind of like her stepson-ish, but not totally really. You know, like, nah. And she's facing all these trials and trying to learn her powers, and, like, you get the drift. It's Viking world. There's a good bit of fighting, but, like, there's also, like, revelry and drinking and fun things, too. Also, it's really freaking cold. Lots of snow and icy water and boats. I would be so seasick. And, like, I think everything smells like fish. A lot. I had previously tried to read one of Danielle L. Jensen's book. I think it was The Bridge Kingdom, and I stopped multiple times. So I was really nervous going into this. But her writing has improved so much. It has this slight fairy tale feel to it where it's a tiny bit formal, so you do get the sense that you're back in time. You get the feel of all these gods. If you know the Norse gods, you're going to recognize things. So you do feel like, oh, it really does have all this Norse mythology, but it also very much has things that are just slightly changed, so you know that it's like a parallel universe. They're not quite our world, or something along those lines. I loved Freya. She was so intense. She suddenly has the weight of the world on her shoulders. There's lore behind it, and she has the gods behind her. It all made sense in this book, and it was so nice to see that she had reasons to feel like she should be the one making her decisions, and she should be diving into the flames figuratively or literally or whatever she's doing. I loved that it made sense for once. Her and Bjorn resisting one another. We got like one horse, one bed, one tent, one tree. Don't ask. We had the best temptations. I loved seeing the general build of their relationship because they actually talked and had things in common, and they talked about his childhood and things that mattered. And yes, there was instant chemistry, but they fought so hard to resist. And literally, they were like right there ready to kiss at times, and like they would be like, no, this is wrong. And like, did it kill me? Yes. But did it make the payoff so much better? Yes. Did I know that this was going to be a series? It's a freaking series. You're going to want to know that because the ending is otherwise incredibly shocking, and you're going to be yelling at the book a lot. Am I going to be counting the days until we hear about when the next book is coming out? Yes, because this was amazing. This is what Romantasy should be. Yeah, I love this one so much. I'm wearing a freaking corset, like a real bone corset for this book. That should tell you everything you need to know. After this was my next Spells and Incantations book. This was the next 8-letter book, and I ended up reading Atalanta by Jennifer Saint. This is the same author who gave us Ariadne and Electra, and I thought she had grown so much as a writer from when we saw her in Ariadne. This is the story of a girl who was basically left in the woods by her parents and raised by bears, and then sort of adopted by the goddess Artemis and allowed to grow up and live with her nymphs and sort of be in that wonderful, like, innocent family. They all have like vows of chastity, to be very clear, and they just live in this perfect, pure, harmonious world. But things can't always stay the same. In Atalanta, she's amazing with a bow and arrow. She's the fastest runner. She's super strong, and eventually Artemis is like, look, Jason and the Argonauts are going on this mission to go get the Golden Fleece, and I would love it if you would go in my honor, basically. And like all the warriors that are going are like super fierce. It's like war heroes, and you're gonna recognize all the names as they go. It's like Heracles and like all these people who are major names in Greek mythology. It's incredible to see it. And they meet all these people and monsters and the islands as they go along on this adventure. Obviously, she agrees to go. The only thing is that Artemis is like, you know, the prophecy here is that like if you get married, that's going to be your downfall. If you couple up like and get married, that's gonna be the end for you. And of course she falls falls for a guy on the trip and doesn't quite heed Artemis this morning. She's not married, but like, you know, it's not great. And as she's falling for this guy, she's kind of like questioning Artemis's intentions a little. Like, maybe she can have it all, love and be a heroine. Yeah, don't question the gods and goddesses. So the book opens with some of the most beautiful descriptions of the forest and nature, and I am semi-obsessed with Artemis. I think she's probably the most misunderstood Greek goddess. Everyone sees her as this huntress, but she's a goddess of so much else, and she is such a contradictory goddess. You know, she is the goddess of the hunt, but she's also the goddess of the forest who protects nature and the animals and the forest itself. And she is a goddess who has sworn to never, you know, lie with a man, never fall in love, never get married, and remain pure her entire life. Yet she's also the goddess of childbirth, and she is the goddess she's like that last goddess you call on, and she's the one who decides who lives and dies in childbirth, the mom and the child. And she's got so many other tiny little things. Like, there's something that falls through the cracks that kind of gets thrown at Artemis. It's pretty funny. And no one really pays attention to that. And I think Jennifer Saint kind of wanted to call attention to some of those things, which was great. And we got to see a side of Artemis that I think people tend to ignore. This soft side, this maternal side, this motherly side. Her talking about you don't want to see what happens when men take advantage of a woman, and you don't want to see what I have to see when I am that last resort, when a woman is trying to hang on to life in childbirth. You don't want to see that. And very much in the beginning, men are portrayed as something terrible. Atalanta is abandoned at birth by her father. We see centaurs who try to take advantage of Atalanta. We see a nymph who is taken advantage of by Zeus and becomes pregnant, and she is not allowed to remain with them. Men are something to be feared, and the results of lying with them are something very much to be feared. And seeing those parts of Artemis as well as her maternal side, it was nice to see her protective side, her loving side, her side of caring for the animals. And we also saw that, like, mysterious, fearsome side. Of course, you never know when she's going to appear. She has these very strong rules. I thought it was a great depiction of the goddess herself. The adventure itself, I loved the writing. I loved seeing characters that I forgot were going to show up. I didn't know the story of Jason and the Argonauts and the Golden Fleece super well, or particularly well at all, honestly, but as I was reading along, I was like, oh right, oh, I did know this, oh, I did know that character, oh, I know that relation to that character, oh, I knew this happened, oh, that's how that happened. It kind of made a bunch of connections to other stories that, like, I didn't know how they happened, so I loved reading this book for that. In terms of the romance, I thought this was so much more well done than anything that had been done in Ariadne. I really did. It was believable and sweet and loving and tender, and everything felt really real. I think there was some representation and some other things that I wasn't expecting as well. I was initially really nervous about Atalanta being the only woman on this journey with just men on this ship, but it really was about her proving herself and being a heroine, and she was seen as an honorable hero, and it wasn't awful and terrible, and I was grateful for that. But it did give her a really different perspective every time that they landed on land, and the way that they talked about women, and she was able to be privy to things that no other woman was going to, and seeing the way that they treated the women when they did arrive on islands, and hearing them plan things, and hearing the way that they spoke about even other men. It was eye-opening for her and eye-opening for the reader as well, I think. You know, it's so interesting because I've read so many Greek retellings, and right now Greek retellings, I think they're sort of falling off to a certain extent. The popular thing to do, right, is to take a story and reframe it to be around a female character and give that female character the main voice of the story. That doesn't necessarily make it a feminist retelling, it just gives a female in a story a voice. I think we finally have a truly feminist tale here where Atalanta is making all of her own decisions, and the deities who are in play, goddesses. So if you really want to read a truly, completely feminist retelling in which women are entirely acting of their own agency as much as you can with goddesses doing the manipulation. But even then, it's the female ones. This is the one that finally does it, I think. Finally, for restoration, nope, this is not the right one. I chose to do Murder Road by Simone St. James. Now, Simone St. James is a great thriller writer because she does not mess around. If she's one of the few thriller writers who is like, you know what? I'm not just going to pretend to do supernatural. No, we are actually going there. And she goes really hard with the supernatural in this one, guys. We're not just getting like snippets here and there. She doesn't wait till the end. She's like, no, we're going hard from the beginning. This is about a couple in the 90s, which was a lot of fun. April and Eddie in 1995, they're going on their honeymoon, and they wind up taking like a wrong turn, and they end up in this back road, and they see a hitchhiker, and it turns out to be this girl, and they're like, oh man, we shouldn't just like leave her like just alone. It's a creepy dark road in the middle of the night. It's dangerous. So they pick her up, and April leans back and is like, hey, are you okay? And like there's blood seeping through her jacket, and she's like, oh my god, we have to take her to the hospital now. So they rush her to the hospital, and there's this like truck that chases them on part of the way, but like as they turn off, like the truck clearly doesn't want to be seen, so like it keeps going, and they get to the hospital, and the hitchhiker dies, and like the cops show up, and all of a sudden it's very clear that they're like kind of witnesses, but also maybe kind of suspects. And then it turns out that along this road, there's maybe kind of a sort of a serial killer that's been getting people, and they're the only witnesses who've ever seen anything. And boy, it's awfully suspect that they're the only ones who've ever seen anything, ever, and brought the only person to ever survive for a little while even to the hospital. Yay, honeymoon. So they decide to stick around and like do some investigating of their own. Just the town nearby seems really creepy, and things seem like off and haunted, and the police really seem to want to pin everything on them. So that's how they're going to spend their honeymoon, and that's the book. This was great. I could not put this book down. I was literally hooked like 25 pages in. I was just done. I was just zoomed in on this book. I couldn't put it down. I couldn't believe that we were going to go supernatural straight away. So I was like looking for all these clues and trying to pick things out. And I was like, who could it possibly be? And then this suspect turned up who didn't make any sense, but like he was the only one who could have done it. And, like all of the like evidence was planted there. And then there was this creepy truck that kept turning up. And I was just like, what is going on? And then they're staying at this really like kind of run down B&B that no one wants to stay out. And like there's like rumors that like the woman running it like murdered her husband and buried him in the garden in the backyard where nothing will grow. And I was like, is this something? But she seems like really cool, and it just flew. This story flew. I was like waiting and waiting, and it did not disappoint at all. I did figure out the one twist like halfway through, and the author like tried to like back off because it was like so clearly one of the twists, and she was like, no, I was just kidding. But like, no, you're not fooling me. Don't play games. I know what you're doing. And it was that. But I didn't even care because it allowed the whole story, and it allowed everything to just like make sense and come full circle. So I was like, don't not do that. You have to do that. And she did, thank God. Simone St. James just knows how to do the best supernatural thrillers. Like, they're not going to terrify you. They're not going to be like so scary. I didn't read them before bed. Normal people could read them before bed probably. They're not going to be like super terrifying, but they're just enthralling. You don't want to put them down. You have to know what's happening. Everything is going to be tight and make sense. Everything's going to pull you in. You're going to find things out. Like, it's never going to feel like it's dragging on. You're always moving on to the next step, the next clue. Is there going to be misdirection at some point? Maybe a little, but everything feels like it's told to you for a reason eventually, and I just loved it. And the ending, I was like, whoa, wait a minute. She always has this little zinger at the end, it seems, where it's like, you think the story's over, you think you got everything's all like neat as a pin and good to go, and then she's just like, 1 minute. Oh my gosh. So yeah, Murder Road was great. This would be an incredible read for Summerween because it does have like all the summer feels. You're like grilling outside, and it's like they do get married at some point, like it's in the summer. I think it's July. This would be the best read for like Summerween, you guys, if you're gonna participate. It does have the summer vibes, but it's spooky and creepy. This was great. This was great. Such a fast read too. You will pick this up and put this down and be like, oh, the afternoon's over and so is the book. Okay. After this, I had to read a book for Artificery, which is the new one. We were learning like a lock and key kind of like spell, and you need a book with a lock or a key in the cover. And I was either going to read Hotel Magnifique or I was going to read The Turn of the Key by Ruth Ware. And I chose to read the one by Ruth Ware. I was just in the mood. I read a lot of fantasy and I was just like, this is going to be a fast read. I'm really loving the thrillers that I've picked up throughout this. So let's do it, Ruth Ware. And this is one of her later ones. I didn't know anything about this book. I know it's based on The Turn of the Screw, but like I haven't read it, don't know anything about it. And I still don't know what the description of this book is, but I can tell you that it starts with this woman who is writing letters to this lawyer. And the whole thing is supposed to be like epistolary, I think, like in the form of letters, but you forget their letters because the letters become so long that they're like 100 pages long. You forget that they're letters by the end of the book. She's writing letters to a lawyer from a jail cell, which is not a great start. And she's like, I don't know how to explain this to you. Hi, you've probably heard of my case. It's really famous. I was the nanny in that case where that kid died. Yeah, that one. I'm like, oh, this is a fun start to the story. And she's like, yeah, I was that nanny up in that like isolated house. And like, but you don't know the true story. I'm totally innocent. I think I know what happened, but you have to listen to me. And like, my own lawyer doesn't believe me. He doesn't trust me. He's not listening to anything I say. He's not letting me talk to him or to anyone else. Like, please, you have to listen to me. You're my last hope. I've been in jail for years. And it's really scary here. Like, I'm going to write my whole story to you. And like, you have to listen to me. So she starts by explaining she's interviewed with this really fancy house where there's this like amazing salary and like the parents are going to be away a lot, but she has to take care of like a baby, two like older kids, I think they're like 9 and 11 or something, I forget exactly, and then like a teenager, but she's off at boarding school and only there on weekends. And you find out slowly like another little girl died there a long time ago, and her dad was a scientist who played around a lot with this like poison garden that was there, and it's all wired to be like a smart house. There's like this alarm system that can go off at times and like all these settings. Everything is on like this electronic system, and it's called Happy, which is really creepy, and it'll like have everything set to your own preferences, like in the shower and stuff, and it'll address you at times, and like it does everything, and it has cameras everywhere. And you find out slowly like another little girl died there a long time ago, and her dad was a scientist who played around a lot with this like poison garden that was there. And the whole time I'm like, okay, this is reading like at first, okay, we're at Manderley. This is some sort of Rebecca retelling. There's like a haunted attic, there's creepy sounds, the dead child's gonna like take place, the dead wife, I'm following it. But I thought this was retelling The Turn of the Screw. I don't know the Return of the Screw. And then I'm seeing the poison, like, garden. I'm like, okay, this is some sort of Rappaccini's daughter. One of the kids is going to be, like, poisonous or dangerous or something. And, like, I'm following this whole stupid book, trying to figure out all the literary references for who knows what reason. I don't know where my head was at. I wasn't paying attention. And I tried to flip back and see, like, if all the clues were there. Like, there's this handsome gardener guy there who had the same last name as, like, the original guy who owned the house, who made the poison garden. And, like, was I just not paying attention? No, I was just not paying any freaking attention. And, like, the clues were there. The ending did not come out of nowhere, but I was too busy like, where's the next literary reference? What is this referencing? Literally, it says it's based on The Turn of the Screw. You don't know the book. I don't know where my head was at. It was a good book. It was creepy. You could not pay me to go stay in this house for any salary, and like being the only adult there with these kids and like caring for a baby and like never getting any sleep because there's always like alarms going off or things happening and things creaking in the attic and you don't know how to get to the attic, and then you find like a secret door and like where are all the locks and why are keys disappearing. This house, I couldn't have handled it. I would have lost my mind before anything bad happened. Like, you would have had to cart me away. I could not have dealt with this. This is my nightmare. Now, for me to have this strong of a reaction, clearly it was a great book. It was a fantastic read. This was so effective. This is not one to read when you are like feeling really anxious or like claustrophobic late at night. I was so anxious reading this book, but it was really good. I also had to read a book for my inscription class. This was typography. I had to write down 3 titles and fold up the papers, and then I had to choose one. Drew The Well of Ascension by Brandon Sanderson for this book. If you want a full review, please see my first video on Orilium when I talked about all the scary sequels I had to read. You remember, invested in first book, scared to read second. That's generally how it goes, so I put them off for like a year or two, which is generally a disaster. Thankfully, Brandon Sanderson actually gives you little summaries of the first book in the back, which is amazing. This was also fantastic. I love the Mistborn series. If you're intimidated, don't be, and if you haven't read Brandon Sanderson, start with Mistborn. This is definitely a series to start with. It's slightly less terrifying than his other series, which, what are those books? Over 1,000 pages each? Yeah, start with this one. But great. And finally, the last thing I had to read was another book for restoration, which is another book that you think will get you out of a reading slump, you know, regaining consciousness, that spell. And I read These Hollow Vows by Lexi Ryan. And this I was just like, okay, I've heard this is a total ripoff of ACOTAR. I know exactly what's going to happen, but I miss ACOTAR. I loved ACOTAR. It was one of my favorite books. It totally got me back into reading. So I was like, it's fine. I don't care if it's a total ripoff. I'm going to love it. I want to reread ACOTAR, but I also don't like want to reread a book right now. So it's gonna be great. And I went in and I was like, this is about a girl. Her sister gets kidnapped by like the king of like the Unseelie, that's like the Dark Fae, and like he's holding her captive, and so she has to go infiltrate the Light Seelie, and like the prince is looking for a princess to marry, and he really likes her, so she's staying at the court, and like she's a princess contender, and she has to collect these things for the Unseelie king in order for him to like release her sister. There's also a like rebellion leader who turns out to be like from the Unseelie courts, and his name is Finn, and he wants to help her out, like, because it turns out, you know, infiltrating the Fae court, it's not that easy, and she reluctantly accepts his help. So we've got, you know, Light Fae, Dark Fae, that whole thing going on. I was like, oh, obviously, like, the Light Fae, it's not going to turn out to be all that great, and the Dark Fae is going to be, like, the one chick she wants, and, like, blah, blah, blah. There's even, like, the tattoo thing that comes in at some point, I think. This is not a total ripoff of A Court in Thorns and Roses. Like, I get the similarities. I see the similarities. But because I was so, like, people had told me that, I so thought I knew exactly what was going to happen and how things were going to go and how the ending was going to go. The twist on A Court of Thorns and Roses threw me for such a loop. I felt like I fell out of a chair or something when I finished this book. I loved this book. I had the most fun reading this book. I was smiling. I was delighted. And right now, I am reading the sequel. I never do that. I never, ever, ever, ever pick up the sequel right after reading the first book. I don't even know what the lore challenges are. I just immediately picked up the second book. And if you have read ACOTAR and you haven't read this because you've heard this as a total ripoff, you know what? If you want the nostalgia, if you want to just go back and enjoy, if you want to just feel happy, like, yes, there are so many similarities. No, it's not the best thing ever written, but did I have fun? Did I enjoy every minute? Was I just feeling nostalgic and joyful and delighted? Yes. There were surprises that I didn't see coming. There were surprises that, okay, maybe I probably did see coming. But the way they were written at the end, I was just like, no. Now, the problem, of course, with these types of books is that once you get to the end of the first one, the author kind of has to do the big reveal, right? Like, here's what's really happening, here's the deal, here's who everyone actually is, here's what's actually going on. So with the second book, I've barely started it. We'll see if we can keep up with the fun and the surprises and the joy and the delight. We'll see where it goes, because let's face it, the second book in the ACOTAR series is the best, but this is only a duology. And this doesn't have the same, like, grand scale. It just doesn't. So we're going to see where it goes. But the first book, maybe we're familiar with these tropes, sure. There's a comfort in that. And I don't think there's anything wrong with going back to some of your Romantasy roots and enjoying them again. And maybe that's what this semester at Orilium was for me. It was realizing that authors trying to push boundaries too much can ruin a good thing, and going back to my original roots when it comes to why choose Romantasy, thrillers, all those things, I rediscovered that joy and that fun. And you don't have to constantly reinvent things. Give them twists, change it a little bit, sure, but don't push it so far that it's unrecognizable to the point where it's not fun anymore. But that's all for me. I had the most fun doing this readathon. Orilium's always the best time, but this semester truly brought me back from the worst reading slump I had been in a very long time. I'd been really sick. I don't know if you can see it. I've not been dyeing my hair because about half of it fell out. I was so sick. It was not great. I am so glad at least my joy in books is back and I have my escape back, and I'm so glad to be back making videos with you guys. I can't wait to see what books I'm going to be reading in May. I think it's going to be a lot of like mood reading May, but we've also got Bridgerton coming. I think I want to do something for that. I haven't read the last 4 books in the series, and I have the Once Upon a Book boxes for it, so I have all the goodies to open with them, and I have the lore adventure to do, and I'm just enjoying books, and I'm enjoying you guys so much, and thank you so much for all of your support through all of my health stuff. You guys have been amazing. But I will let you guys get back to your book, and I'll be getting back to mine. I'll be reading the sequel to These Hollow Vows, which is called These Twisted Bonds, and twisted they freaking are, let me tell you. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.